Innovative NASCAR mechanic and pit crew pioneer Mario Rossi mysteriously disappeared from the Bahamas in early 1983. His family saw him to the airport after Christmas and then never saw him again. A phone call placed January 3rd from Mario's girlfriend alleged that he had died in an airplane crash. But there was zero evidence found of this crash and no media coverage of his death for many years, which was pretty odd due to the fame that he had found in life. Mario Rossi was so successful at his career, he won prestigious awards. He developed critical vehicle safety components and made headlines regularly. Yet, until recently, there has been nearly no coverage of his mysterious disappearance, which honestly makes it all that more mysterious. Was he involved in illegal drug trade? Several of his associates had been arrested the previous year for moving large quantities of marijuana into the States. Mario had not faced the same legal trouble, but he had been working alongside them the whole time. Had he been embroiled in the same smuggling that took down 70 people, including several of his NASCAR associates? A report produced by Mario's insurance company asserted that the plane crash had never happened, citing evidence that his Cessna had been since sold. In fact, it still exists to this day. Why did Mario's girlfriend lie about his death? It seems certain now that Mario did not die in a plane crash that never happened, but the question remains: where is Mario Rossi? When his family took Mario to the Philadelphia airport after spending Christmas with him in 1982, not one of them thought that it would be the last time they ever saw him alive. Mario traveled a lot, chasing race car titles and championships all over the country, but Mario always came back. He always came home to see his mama at Christmas. But just a few days later, on New Year's Day, when Mario's son Bill calls his dad to wish him a Happy New Year, there was no answer, and there was no return call. 2 days after that, in early January, Mario's mother received a phone call, informing her that Mario had died when he crashed his plane off the coast of the Bahamas. Mario had been a good driver, a great mechanic, and a reliable pilot, but at the time, there was no reason not to believe the person on the other line. It was devastating news, but it was news that they believed. Virginia DiMattia, Mario's younger sister, said, "At first, when we received the call in January of 1983, we did think he was dead. But as the weeks went by and we reflected on the information and the phone calls, we were not sure." None of Mario's family had met his girlfriend, Betty. They didn't even know her last name. That first call had been so upsetting that it had ended abruptly. But Betty had left a phone number, and with this number, they did reach out and speak with Betty again. This time, Betty said that some of Mario's friends from Florida, his racing associate Gary, would go and see what happened. When Betty called back again, they were told that there was nothing left of Mario's plane except for the very tail. Betty said that everything else had burned up. This, of course, sounded very suspicious, but again, there was no reason not to believe the person on the other line. Then, Mario's family wasn't able to get in touch with his landlady in the Bahamas and wasn't able to collect his belongings. Things began to feel stranger. The Bahamian authorities had no record of Mario's crash, and they weren't interested in investigating either. The phone number that they had used to reach Betty was disconnected. The family would spend years trying to find Betty again. Mario's two younger sisters, Virginia and Beatrice, or B as she goes by, spent a lot of time wondering where Mario had gone. When talking about the search for her brother with the Sneak podcaster Nate Scott, she says that those first years, it was very, very emotional. Thinking back on the last few days that they had spent with Mario, his sisters wondered if there were signs that they had missed, ominous symbols of his upcoming departure. While Mario was always a very generous and kind brother, his gifts that year had been more extravagant than the last Christmas. Mario had gifted them $300 each, a lot of money to give your siblings in 1982. Was it a parting gift? A goodbye before Mario left their lives on purpose? The visit was different, B said about that last Christmas with Mario, and when they said their goodbyes at the airport, he gave her 2 really big hugs, and then he was gone. For the longest time, I thought he was in the witness protection program, B said. Mario was an experienced pilot, and of course, there was that investigation by Prudential several years following the supposed accident that showed that Mario's plane had been resold. Why else would Betty have lied about the plane crash? If Mario had entered witness protection, it would make sense that he would need a lie for his absence. Several friends had also reported sightings of Mario to the family. 2 people saw him in Virginia, B recounted. Another man who had known Mario since he was a child told B that he had seen Mario in Las Vegas. The man insisted that he would have recognized Mario accurately. He said that when he called out to him, Mario turned around at the sound of his name, but in just seconds, he vanished into the crowd. At one time, his first wife, Jane, also thought that Mario had decided to go into hiding. I think Mario may have chosen to do this, she told the Spartanburg Herald Journal's Chris Winston. If he's not dead, then he chose this because he's ashamed of his lifestyle, and he just wanted to disappear from his family, from all his connections. When that next Christmas came around, it was a difficult time for Mario's family, especially his mother. Mario's mom never gave up hope of finding her son. His daughter, Tina, spoke at length about her grandmother's quest. Any person I named, she called 10 times over. She really did all she could do, up until her death, to resolve in her mind if he could have left on his own and done this to his family, or did he have to leave? Tina finds it unlikely that her father entered the witness protection program. There were no court records indicating that he ever testified against his criminal associates, and he wasn't the type of person to turn against his friends to save himself from trouble. She also finds it hard to believe that he would choose to stay away from his family for so long and leave his mother wondering about her dear son on her deathbed. What son would choose to put his mother through that agony? Tina says, I want to believe that he is dead, because that would make him a better person. Who was Mario Rossi? Was he a man that would ask his girlfriend to lie about his death so that he could disappear forever? Despite being a family man at Christmas time, Mario Rossi was a race car man through and through. He had dedicated his life to the track and admitted publicly that he was kind of married to his job. A person who wants to make the grade in racing has got to forsake his personal life for a lot of hard and dirty work. Mario was engaged to Patty Jensen Corbett in the early 80s. She described him as an intelligent man who knew people all over the world and could speak like 5 languages. Patty agrees with Mario's first wife, Jane. She thinks that he disappeared by choice. Could Mario have made himself disappear? could he have stayed away from not only his family, but from engines and racing? Mario loved racing. He had been both skilled and mechanically inclined from an early age, reportedly taking apart and successfully putting back together an engine at only 7 years old. Mario dropped out of high school to run his own automotive shop as a teenager in Trenton, New Jersey. The more he learned about cars, engines, and racing, the more he loved it. In one interview, he said, "I guess everybody has a dream about making it big, and I was no different. I didn't finish high school, and as a result, I take a lot of pride in what I've been able to accomplish." And he accomplished a lot. Mario Rossi was recognized repeatedly throughout his career and featured regularly in the press. He was a trend-setting innovator who embraced the early NASCAR culture, bending rules and testing limits. He was also fiercely dedicated to the safety of his drivers. Mario was hardworking and ambitious on the track, but he did also start a family. He had 2 children, was married to 2 women, and engaged to another, in addition to having many girlfriends. People liked Mario. He was charismatic and intelligent, and he made famous friends throughout the sport of racing. It was at his auto shop in 1957 that Mario had a chance meeting with Tom Pistone, a driver in what was then the NASCAR's Grand National Series, the equivalent of today's Nextel Cup Series. Mario had himself already participated in several Grand National races, scoring one respectable top 10 finish in 1955, before deciding that his talent and potential were greater assets behind the scenes, rather than behind the wheel. Tom Pistone asked Mario to help service and maintain his race cars, and then he invited Rossi to join the team for the 1959 season. Soon, Mario was Pistone's crew chief and head mechanic. Committed to advancing in the sport, Mario and his first wife, Jane, packed up their New Jersey home and headed south to Charlotte, the land of NASCAR and stock car racing. It was there that he started his family. Jane and Mario welcomed a son, Bill, and a daughter, Tina. He also worked with some of NASCAR's giants of the time, like Smokey Yunick. In 1964, Mario went to work for Bud Moore as his chief mechanic and engine builder. One of Moore's drivers at the time was 1963 Rookie of the Year Billy Wade. Billy and Mario became close, and together with Wade at the wheel, they won 4 consecutive races in July of 1964. The fast friends enjoyed traveling and competing at the top of their sport until January of 1965. While making his way around the track during a tire test, Billy's right front tire blew out, and he hit the wall at the Daytona International Speedway. Tragically, Billy died. Mario was haunted by the death of his friend Billy Wade, and he made it his mission to improve driver safety. Billy Wade died because of his seatbelt, Rossi said in a 1965 interview. Doctors had determined that the lap belt compressed Billy's intestines, causing them to rupture. Under the impact, the belt became a lethal weapon, Mario said. "Maybe it was a freak accident, but I don't want it to happen again to anyone." After spending months studying high-speed collision data from the U.S. Army, he developed a new safety belt. Rossi's seatbelt redesign added a 3rd belt. This new belt fastened the lap belt to the floor, holding it in place and keeping serious injuries like the one Billy Wade experienced from occurring. The device helped save countless lives and earned him a prestigious Grey Rock Safety Award. Mario was also responsible for putting headrests in stock cars, an innovation that quickly caught on in American production cars. In 1967, Rossi's career advanced even further, and he started his own racing team. Still, he continued to prioritize driver safety. He and his driver Bobby Allison participated in an unprecedented boycott of a major NASCAR event. In 1969, the Talladega boycott. 37 teams left the Alabama International Motor Speedway in protest, refusing to participate over safety concerns. It was around this time that Mario learned to fly. It was common for teams to use small planes to pilot themselves and crews up and down the coast to various races. Mario continued to be innovative at the top of his field. In 4 years of racing, his team had amassed 5 wins and 39 top 10 finishes. But his dedication to the sport had taken its toll on his marriage, and Mario and Jane divorced. Mario's hard work and dedication to perfection was unparalleled, especially when his team focused on reducing unnecessary time spent at pit stops. They were the first ever to glue their lug nuts onto the wheels. It made him head of the fastest pit crew team in the whole auto racing world. Instead of having to attach each individual lug nut to a wheel, the lug nuts were pre-attached and tightened during the tire change. It was a revolutionary idea that saved them a lot of time during pit stops, and it's an innovation that is still used in racing to this day. That year, they won the World Champion Pit Crew Award. The next year, in 1971, at perhaps the height of his career, Mario faced off with the president of NASCAR, Bill France. France had instituted a new rule to effectively banish cars with rear spoilers from the sport. Any aerodynamically superior wing cars using spoilers like the Superbird or Mario's Charger Daytona were required to use tiny 305 cubic inch engines if they wanted to compete. All the other cars could run big block 426 or 427 inch engines. Who would really want to compete in such an obviously outmatched race? Bill France's rule forced many racers to change vehicles, but Rossi saw the value in the rear spoiler of his winged Dodge. Mario called on Keith Black to help him make his small engine, and that day in Daytona, he no doubt rolled up to laughter and jokes. They called his little engine the Lunchbox, but then Mario's driver qualified 8th in the starting grid. Then they led 5 laps of the race. The car was a huge hit with fans and lightweight, so it moved quickly around the track. Unfortunately, Mario's driver, Dick Brooks, went sideways and he collided with Pete Hamilton. Still, somehow he managed a 7th place finish. It was the only wing car on the track that day, and it would be the last car with a wing on it to appear in a NASCAR race for almost 40 years. Mario enjoyed good publicity and some success as a race team owner, but behind the scenes, his team struggled financially. Due to some real and perceived safety issues, race sponsors and car manufacturers had pulled back nearly all of their support for NASCAR teams following the 1970 season. On top of that, while Rossi had been an incredible mechanic and very intelligent about engines, he had not been smart about money. Donnie Davis, who spent several years working with Mario, said, "Rossi was one of the best mechanics or engine people I knew. I learned everything I know from him, but he was a poor businessman. If he made $1,000 during the day, he'd spend $1,500 that night." Without any money to run his team, Mario gave up NASCAR car ownership, opting to work instead for the DieGuard team in North Carolina, with a former friend and driver, Donnie Allison, at the wheel. The team had some success, until Darrell Waltrip took over as driver. Waltrip publicly badmouthed Rossi, his crew chief, and quickly had him fired. By the mid-70s, Mario's life had begun slowly turning upside down. He and Olivia, his second wife, were forced to declare bankruptcy. They left North Carolina and moved to Atlanta. When Mario returned to NASCAR in 1979, it was for a team who had sorted out their funding issues, but in an illegal way. Mario returned to NASCAR serving as the crew chief for Gary Ballou in a car owned by Billy Harvey. Gary Ballou and Billy Harvey were funding their lifestyles and racing aspirations by moving and selling marijuana in southern Florida. They were using boats to transport multi-ton quantities of weed from Colombia into the United States. According to his daughter Tina, Mario was at least partly involved in selling drugs with Gary Ballou. She lived with him in Florida in the very early 80s and told reporter Chris Winston that she personally witnessed them handling drugs on more than one occasion, saying, quote, "They would be using the scales to weigh out the drugs, but I really have no idea what they were doing with it." But the FBI did, and on February 18, 1982, 4 days after the Daytona 500, 70 people are arrested in what the media called Black Thursday. Famed NASCAR owners and drivers Billy Harvey, Pee Wee Griffin, and Gary Ballou are among them, but not Mario. The drug smuggling operation was said to have moved 1 million pounds of marijuana to the tune of $300 million each year. Mario had been Gary Ballou's mechanic at the time of his arrest, and he had been working for Billy Harvey, the man the federal indictment named as the supervisor and manager of the entire drug smuggling operation. But Mario was not charged with anything. Patty Jensen Corbett, Mario's fiancée in 1982, said that while he was involved with Billy Harvey, Pee Wee Griffin, and Gary Ballou, she says she didn't witness any drug smuggling. But when he called her about the Black Thursday arrests, he said there was a big bust and he was going to have to lay low for a while. Patty thought that he was worried about these not very nice guys who knew exactly where he lived. For his crimes, Gary Ballou will go to federal prison for 7 years. Billy Harvey is sentenced to 14. Mario had not only been a race car associate of these men, but he was building speedboat engines for them. He had become involved with boat racing, building motors for the Class Act racing team in Florida. He had also built some engines specifically for Billy Harvey and Pee Wee Griffin in his shop in Atlanta. Were these men using these same boats to move drugs illegally? Possibly. While it doesn't directly implicate Mario, it also didn't look good. Had Mario been involved with the drug dealing? Patty didn't see it, but Tina sure thought so. She was so frustrated by her father's involvement in drug smuggling and his lack of paternal support that she moved out of his Boca Raton home. Tina said, "I loved him because he was my father before I went. Then, when I lived with him, I learned that he wasn't really into his fatherhood role." Patty leaves him around this time, too. He's started up an affair with a coworker's wife's sister. It's Betty, the infamous bearer of bad news, the person on the phone who says that Mario's wrecked a plane that still exists. Mario met Betty while working at Lester Engines. It's another speedboat company. It appears that Mario does lay low for a while in 1982. He's working extra hours at Lester Engines and spending his off time with Betty at their homes in Florida and at his home in the Bahamas, relaxing in the sun and flying his little Cessna around. Tina wasn't speaking to him. "I left angry and went home angry," she said. I didn't talk to him until Christmas. I was still angry at the whole thing. When Mario returned to New Jersey that year for Christmas, he didn't bring Betty. He didn't tell his family about her either. Mario's sisters spent many years trying to track her down after the phone number she left them that early January was disconnected. Betty seemed like the key to the puzzle. For many years, the family is alone in their quest to find Mario. They instigate one or two media pieces in their attempts, but generally, his strange disappearance is widely ignored. Until recently. Nate Scott and his team dedicated an entire season of his podcast, The Sneak, to Mario's life and shined some new light on Mario's mysterious disappearance. Like most media that cover the case, they discuss the theories. In 2007, Mario's sister used the Freedom of Information Act to request information about Mario's placement in the Witness Protection Program. She received a written reply stating that the Marshal's Service will neither confirm nor deny the existence of the records you seek. So, there's no real official answer on that, but law enforcement officers have stated that in cases where individuals enter the Witness Protection Program, they are given the chance to really say goodbye and tell their families at least that they are leaving for their own safety. Mario didn't do that. And those that knew him tend to agree, informing on his friends and entering the Witness Protection Program was just not his style. It's difficult to prove whether or not Mario was involved in the drug smuggling ring that his friends were caught up in. The FBI didn't think so at the time, or they probably would have arrested him along with everyone else that Black Thursday in 1982. However, had he been involved and somehow escaped arrest, it could have given off the appearance that he had been cooperative with authorities, even if he hadn't been. In January of 1983, many of the men charged in the drug operations are out on bail or under house arrest, preparing for trials that won't occur until that fall. One of them, in fact, may have been involved in the early search for Mario. So, very little information had been given to Mario's family when they learned that he had died. Mario's sister B recalled that on the phone, Betty said some of Mario's friends from Florida and his racing associate Gary would go and see what happened. And then, when Betty called back again, they were told that there was nothing left of Mario's plane except for the very tail, and that everything else had burned up. It seems crucial to follow what little evidence of misdirection or fabrication exists at the heart of this case. If the plane has not crashed, then why would Betty say that? Or was it Gary that had said it? Why did Betty lie? It is her connection to his place of employment, Lester Engines, that finally leads Nate Scott to Betty. Her last name was Ferrier, and sadly, she's passed away from liver failure. He is able to speak with her brother-in-law, the Lester Engines co-worker, Bruce Atkinson. Bruce confirmed that Mario and his wife's sister Betty dated in the early 80s and tells Nate that at that time Mario had gotten involved in a drug smuggling operation. He's not sure where Mario is, but he doesn't think that he would rat anyone out or be a federal informant. Bruce also says that it was not Betty that told him about Mario's plane crash, but Gary Ballou. He also thought that Gary had told Betty the same, and may have been the person that instructed Betty to call Mario's family. However, Bruce felt at the time that the story about the plane crash was a lie. Gary Ballou does speak with reporters Nate and Michelle at the sneak, and in an extensive interview, he fondly remembers Mario and angrily does not recall giving this news to Bruce. Gary's own theory is that Mario is still alive. Several of those closest to Mario Rossi believed that he chose to start a new life, ashamed of what he had become. It's an interesting theory made complicated by his access to funds. Mario was notoriously bad with money, having previously declared bankruptcy. Would he have had the resources to start a new life? Could he have done it without transportation, his plane? What happened to that plane after all? The sneak journalist Michelle Martinelli used the airplane tail number given to the Rossi family by Betty and tracked down the plane believed to be Mario Rossi's. Its current owner, whose request to stay anonymous is respected, sent a picture of the airplane, and Nate describes it for the audience: a tiny silver and blue plane. This current owner took possession of the small plane in 1992 and was shockingly unaware of the mysterious history of his airplane. Michelle's contact was the first he had heard of Mario Rossi and the apparent crash in the Bahamas. But unfortunately, no effort is made to dive further into the sales history of Mario's airplane. Who did the current owner buy it from? Who sold the plane when it had been owned by Mario? When was it sold and where? Did perhaps Mario sell it to fund a new life under a new identity? Or did someone falsify a sale after Mario disappeared? So many answers could be uncovered with that paperwork. Might a bill of sale for his small plane still exist somewhere in a Florida filing cabinet or a Bahamian bureau? I hope so. Mario's family has been waiting for a very long time. The man was an engine genius, hardworking, dedicated, and devoted to safety. His story is missing its conclusion. If that airplane paperwork still exists, it might have us one step closer to an answer to the question, where is Mario Rossi?